So appreciate y'all being here. This is the agenda from what we talked about when we went around and said, what are our favorite topics? So on the creative buying and financing, this is the stuff that we're going to cover today. We've asked you guys to come prepared with the stuff. This is a mastermind for you to share. And Ryan and I will chime in where and when we need to. Do you have anything related to finance, creative financing, financing options, or creative deal making that is not on this list that you would like us to add, make sure we cover? There may be other stuff that comes up during the conversation, but we want to get something on the list if we're missing anything right now. We went through the list last time, so everybody should kind of know definition-wise what these are. Are we missing anything? Looks good. Awesome. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start. I'm going to grab a chair, actually. Okay. So my plan is just to facilitate. Okay. So we're going to start with wraps and sub twos. So the definition of a wrap and sub two. A wrap is taking an existing loan from a seller and leaving that loan in place and doing an exact duplicate new note and deed of trust on top of that. So you have a note and deed of trust with the seller. The seller has a note and deed of trust with their lender. So there are two loans, two notes and deeds of trust that are exact duplicates. You are wrapping your loan on top of theirs. Subject to just says, I'm buying the house. The title company says, I'm coming to the other side. They don't need to see me. The title company says, hey, there's a loan here. We're going to say, we're going to leave that. And we're going to buy the house subject to that. Just make that as an exception to this title policy so they can't come back.
When? What kind of scenario? When they don't have a lot of equity, so you can pay them out?
The sub two or the wrap or both? Okay. So the question on the floor is, when does a wrap and a sub two make sense? Anybody following Pace Morby? Okay, so you should know that answer. So you guys share, when is an appropriate time? When is it applicable? When does it make sense? And just so you know, HomeVestors is not a fan of this as an acquisition strategy.
So I did a subject to a long time ago. And it basically was a manufactured home, buying the lot too. It did not make sense to flip the property. The numbers weren't there. But it made sense on a rental basis because his loan was cheap. His payments were cheap. So I was able to, I bought it out of foreclosure. He was about to go into foreclosure. I paid all the arrears, gave him a few $1,000s, and then took over his loan and titled it and the property into my name. But that's when he did it. It was just too skinny to actually make sense on anything else. But it still worked out financially as a good opportunity.
Usually they don't have a lot of equity though, right?
Yeah, correct. That's why it didn't make sense to flip it. There was not enough equity in it.
A lot of times there's not enough meat on the bone.
I did one in December, but the lady's a doctor and she doesn't really need the money right now, so I offered her 10 grand more. But I'm shooting from the hip because I've never done it before. So I thought, well, cash flow is like $700 a month, for payments like $600. And I said, I'll cash it out in 2 years. And I thought, well, by then maybe rents have raised or the property, I don't know, just sit on it. It just makes sense for now. But typically you want to cash out the seller. Am I understanding that correctly?
Great question, and also a caution. So I'm gonna make a couple notes because there are some risks. So we're gonna talk about timeframes. We're gonna talk about cashing out. We're gonna talk about the risks to you, the risks to the seller. Okay. Market goes up, it's great. Market goes down, it's not so great. Okay. So I'm gonna table that for a second because I want to come back to the scenarios in which it might make sense. And then we're going to talk about the other stuff as we get into it. So anybody else who has done them, has experience, what was the scenario that you did it? Anybody else have an example or experience? Interesting. Okay, so Derek nailed the majority of them as their thinner deals, thinner equity plays, right? Back when I started, interest rates were at 8%. I mean, that was the conventional financing were 8%. Okay, so if you find somebody that has cheap financing, even if there's equity there, you may end up spending a chunk of money to keep their financing, because I can make something cash flow a lot better when something's at 2 or 3. Think about the interest rates we've had as interest rates start to climb to 4, 5, 6%. How much more valuable is that 2 or 3% interest rate going to be to you, right? From a cash flow, from the ability to have a property that makes sense to buy and hold. Okay, that's one thing. Or I'm going to go get financing from Bell Rock at 12%. Their financing's at 4%. Man, if they leave their money and now I can make a thin deal, it was on the edge, but man, if I save 8% interest on this loan, now it makes more sense, right?
How do you know that loan's assumable?
It's not.
Most
You're not
loans are
assuming it?
not assumable.
Right.
So almost, so thank you. So that's one of the risks. We're gonna come back to that. So, so in the situation in which this could potentially make sense is when the interest rate is favorable, right? Derek mentioned once in foreclosure. I mean, they're gonna lose this house, right? They're walking away or they can't make their payments. Maybe they aren't gonna lose it yet, but they just don't have an answer. The benefit to the seller and the reason why they might do it, if you take over their payments, bring them current and make their payments for them, that will actually fix their credit. It's going to actually improve their credit score and their position. They can't get ahead of this thing. They're digging a pit. They could sell you their house. That doesn't really help, right? That takes a credit line away that was already bad. But improving their credit is actually beneficial to them, okay? We had scenarios where there wasn't equity, but there was cash flow. You're like, okay, I'm not, there's really no margin here, but I can make money on this thing. Oh, by the way, this guy's had this loan for 10 years. So even though I have very little, maybe $100 a month in cash flow, there may be $300 or $400 or $500 a month in principal buy down that's in that loan, because that loan's been amortized for so long that those payments, I'm not going to see it until I sell it. But that's unrealized future gain being built up every month by somebody else making those payments. We bought houses on wraps and had the seller stay there. They just couldn't bring it current and like, I could afford my payment. I just can't bring the 15 or 20 grand. Well, what if I do that? I buy it and let you stay here and you make the payments for a period of time until you get on your feet. We've had that happen. It's crazy, right? So there's all kinds of scenarios where just thinking about what they need and how can we get there, that it might make sense to take over their payments and take over their position, okay? Is there a question?
Derek, you said you were able to title it into your name,
Yeah, I still definitely take title.
but did you do that just through a quitclaim deed or something? Or
Okay, so let's talk about the how-tos, okay? So now we've decided we have a scenario, and here's the thing, you can run it by me, you can run it by Derek. We talk amongst ourselves and Ryan, hey, does this make sense? Let's just talk through it, right? We'll throw out some scenarios. So now we've identified something as a potential. The conversation with the seller is very important, right? You almost kind of have to switch hats, say, hey, listen, and I just have, probably doesn't make sense. This is something we only do once or twice a year, but it's a scenario that kind of sounds like this. So what if, right? And then you talk about something. The same thing, I do the exact same thing with assignments and option contracts. Probably doesn't make sense. Every once in a while, this. So think about that. You're going to kind of shift gears, say, home investors, it's not what we normally do. This is something different that we might be able to do kind of on the site. It's totally above board, goes through title and escrow, right? So we're not doing anything illegal, okay? You cannot wrap or do a sub 2 on an FHA or VA. So you will have to find out if that's the case. Actually, you can wrap a VA loan. Title companies will not touch FHA, and very few of them will do VA. Okay, some VA loans are assumable, but you have to be qualified for assumable loans. Almost all loans on the planet today have an alienation clause. Alienation just means if you sell this house, we can call this loan due and you have to pay it.
Do we know how often they call the note?
Yes,
In-
Danielle?
In my experience, never. Okay, but let's say, so let's,
I was just curious.
No, Rick.
I thought it was never, but I
it's,
didn't know.
it's almost never. The only way a lender would call a performing note is if interest rates are 20% and they've got a 2% loan. But they've sold this to people who have bought this because they want to park their money and leave it. So the only scenario is if something's really screwy going on or somebody wants cash, you're like, hey, where are assets that we can dig into? But it's not a thing typically. Now understand, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a financial planner, I'm not your advisor, and I'm not giving you any coaching as a DA that this is something you should do. Home Investors doesn't like this because in 2007, there were a bunch of people doing this. In 2009, they were all underwater. And there are a handful of Home Investors franchisees that stopped making payments on those obligations. And it turned into a pretty ugly mess. Okay, so we've identified something, we have a conversation. How do we do it? What are the risks? Okay, let's talk about the risks first, and then we'll talk about if everybody's okay with the risks, how do we do it? We okay with that? Okay, what are some of the risks? It's just you and me now.
On this one?
Just, and in general on wraps and sub twos.
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of like to make sure I have a better upside on the risk side. The biggest is if, like, okay, say they know it's gonna get called due or something crazy. Typically I won't let the people that are in it stay in it because obviously they weren't making payments to the mortgage company and my payments gotta be more. So that type of thing, they have to move out as part of condition. Market turns, and this is where you probably as a professional are gonna have more knowledge. You do a wrap or a subject to correctly, there'll be documentation, detailed documentation putting you on the hook for the loan. But if you do it loosely, you can still do it. And if the market turns, you can still walk away from the loan and really that seller's back on the hook. Or they never get off the hook for it.
Unless there's a contract, they want to sue you if you give an out clause. You could put language in there saying if something changes. Yeah, you can put language in there, just like we talked about earlier with the assignments. You can put language in there that gets you off the hook if something bad happens. Would they sign up for that? Maybe, maybe not. I will tell you that my approach, having gone through this, is I'm obligating myself. You're doing this. It's mutually beneficial. We're going into this. I've had these. Guess what? I lived through the downturn. I had houses that I made payments on for nearly 10 years that I was upside down on that I just sold like 2 or 3 years ago because I was finally, positive. And I can use that, and you can see the royal we. You have now heard a story. You can share that story. We home investors have had these scenarios. We've had these experiences. We have done this. We were here when it went down. We kept making those payments. Make sure that you are signing up for that and that you morally are on that same level. But you can use that because we have done that. We have experience, and I can give you testimonials. Okay, so you're on the hook. So let's talk about the buyer side. You as a franchisee, what are your risks?
The little downside is, I'm paying double insurance to cover because theirs is.
Do you have to?
No, I do have to?
Do you have to?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm paying insurance with her PITI, but she's the beneficiary of that. And so I took out another policy in addition. If the house burns down, I want the money.
What if you put yourself on her policy?
I could, I suppose, but I don't want to get into it with her. And if something happens, then she thinks she's owed something. I'm like, no.
Okay.
Walk away from this when I bought it.
So she just identified one of the risks. Seller's still involved. Seller still will get the letters. Seller still gets the statements. Seller wants to make sure that, the seller hasn't gone away. The seller is still there. House is in your name. It's been transferred by title. But that seller is still in this engagement. That seller probably does have an insurance, escrow account. That seller may or may not be taking those interest payments. My seller took my payments off of her taxes for 10 years. I paid off the loan and she's like, hey, where's my money? I paid off that house. I mean, she's like, I didn't know you were doing that. So there's the risk to you as the buyer is you may have some engagement with that seller that you may or may not want to have with somebody who may or may not be a deadbeat. There's a risk as a buyer of the market. The biggest risk we have is the market going down and being underwater on something we have an obligation to. That is the biggest risk. There is a risk if you turn that property into a rental, right, of what happens and the risk also with the seller still being engaged. If that seller, so risk to the seller, they have a loan still on their credit. So one of the conversations you're going to have is, hey, if we do this, right, we do this when people, it's an old couple, they're moving into an apartment, they say things like, yeah, we're never going to own another house. That's a trigger for me that they don't need this financing. They don't need this loan. They don't need their credit. So we maybe can leverage that. In the same case of a lady who was taking the write-offs, she called me 3 years in and said, hey, I want to buy a house because now she's qualified because she has three years worth of payments. So she found somebody to do a loan and wanted me to sign off on this. And she was able to find a lender that took my letter of explanation of, hey, I'm on the hook, I'm obligated, I'm making their payments. Here's the history. They took that and they gave her a loan. I don't know if that's always the case, but there is a risk that the seller may lose their credit worthiness or their ability, not the credit worthiness, their loan ability because they have this financing and they may not have the income to cover that financing. And the lender that may not give them credit for the fact that we're making those payments. So they're on the hook for that. If we don't make the payments and we default, who does the bank come after? The seller. Loans in their name, credits in their name. There is a risk. Okay, I can say I've never done it, never missed a payment. So when I do that, I can, right? It's not an issue. If you do a wrap, the conversation, if somebody's a little skittish, the conversation is, hey, I'm going to buy the house. I'm going to pay your back payments. I'm going to fix up the house and make it nicer because you haven't had any money to do any of this. I'm going to do a note and a deed of trust with you. If I don't make the payment, you can foreclose on me. You get to keep my money. You get to keep all the upgrades. You get the house back. What are the chances of that happening? Right? And they nod. Yeah, I'd be really dumb if you wouldn't. Well, yeah, with the market climbing, I'd be really dumb. I would have loved to walk when the market went down. But that's the conversation with an exact wrap. Why would you do an exact wrap? Because they don't want it loose where you could maybe wander away. They want you on the hook where they can come after you and say, I'm going to foreclose and take the house back. You don't get it. Okay. So exact wrap gives them more legal teeth because there's a note and deed of trust. The subject to is, I promise I will do this. They can come after you legally, civilly, right? Because you're not performing according to an agreement. Unless you have wording in there that says I can walk away if things go bad. Okay, so those are the risks. Okay. Everybody understand the risks? Questions about the risks? Clarification? Can you guys hear me okay online? Sleeping? Oh. Okay. So how-tos. So the first thing you want to do is check with your title company, ask them, will you or won't you do escrows and title on sub-twos and wraps? If they say, what are those? Talk to another title company. If they say no, talk to another title company. If they say yes, is there a difference between the two for you, title company, where you will or won't? And are there any special designations or wording or things that you want me to have in my agreement with my seller so you guys are good with it? Okay, so if you intend to do this, you can wait until you have an opportunity and present it, or you can ask your title company now. Okay, Title Alliance of Phoenix, we'll do them. No problem. I just did one with Crazy pants. So we know we have people that build, okay? Wording, I can share specific wording that I've used. Depending on if you're gonna do a wrap or a sub two, my wording's a little different. When I do a sub two, it just says something to the effect of seller's gonna leave their existing financing in place. Buyer will make payments directly to the lender, bring up back payments, whatever. You're just going to write out what the intentions are.
I did it with Danielle at Title Lines in Phoenix. She kind of led me to believe that it's not sub two anymore, like you just incorporate a wrap in with a sub two, like you do a consistent folder. It's kind of a wrap or nothing. Like you can't do it just sub two. Sub two kind of turns into a wrap.
Did you do a note and deed of trust?
Yes.
Okay, so that might be a change with them. So again, check with your title company.
I might be a little hazy.
So the one we did with her a year and a half ago that turned into a storm prep show, it was just a sub two. We didn't do a note and deed of trust.
It's probably the title company. They're probably just saying, hey, we wrap them now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's a moving target.
Someone say, no, I want a new subject to.
Yeah.
Because it probably gives them more protection.
And it could have been the seller called up and said, hey, how can we do this, that? She's like, oh, I don't know, but you should be able to still do both. I know you can actually. So the sub two is literally just that. It's I'm taking over the payments. I'm going to make the payments. You decide with your seller how you're going to handle that. What I do is ask them permission to get their log on to their bank, their lender, and I just create an ACH directly from my bank account to make those payments. Right? So they see it's there, they see it's happening, and that's sub two. It's easy peasy. I don't have to worry about it. Okay? That also gives me access to pull down the loan and statements and the tax records and all the other stuff that I'm going to need from this point on, because I don't want to have to keep chasing the seller. It's a bit of a hassle. Okay. On a wrap, it's a little more involved, and the language on my contract says we will engage with a trusted third party servicing company to take the payments, and we'll create a note and deed of trust with the seller to fulfill the obligations, right? Something along those lines. So I have the same first language saying, have them take over payments. The second one, it says, but we're going to, in this case, do a note and deed of trust and have a third party. You don't have to do a third party servicing company. Third party servicing company is typically a title company that will take the payments from you and then make the payments to the lender. They track all of those to make sure they're done. They do reporting, and with a note and deed of trust, you've now created a obligation, a lien on the property that's now your lien, right? In order for you to sell that house, your seller needs to sign a release and reconveyance. They have to release that note and deed of trust that you have with them. Again, you're still connected with your seller. What if your seller disappears? With a trusted third party, they will actually get a release and reconveyance signed and hold it in escrow. So when you complete your obligation, they can release it, right? There's a setup fee. It's usually $100 or so. There's 15 to 20 bucks a month for each payment. And then there's usually a payoff. So it's going to cost you a few $100, but it puts the seller at ease, puts a nice formal clean layer over everything. But it's more involved, and there's more hooks. Okay.
I want to run a scenario by, but I interrupted you.
No, you didn't. So I was just asking, any questions, clarification, anything you don't understand about the mechanics, and those are high level. Again, we're not going to teach you all the details, but just have enough of awareness of what it looks like and where it makes sense that you then pull me, pull the title company, pull the people in that can bring it over the finish line if it's appropriate. The last thing was, she asked about timing. I prefer more time. So I'm in my Sandler way going to ask, right? Probably this is something that you would just let sit out there for 5 or 10 years. I don't care. I mean, if you're helping somebody and they're in pain, they don't care. If it's a thin deal and it's one of these guys like, hey, I'm not gonna sell my house and let you make this much money. I'm only gonna, well, if we work together, will you give me? That guy may let me use his financing for a year. But a lot of those guys are gonna say, no, I want this off my back. I want it off. I want this cleared in 12 months. Fine, write it in the contract. I typically do 3 years. If they have a limit, I'll start at 3 and work my way backwards. If it's a short-term thing where I'm just using their money for a flip, I don't care. But if it's a rental deal, I want to get 3 years out of them. But that's, right, you,
I do the same. I try to get as long as I can.
yeah, so it's a conversation you need to have. What are your plans? Oh, I'm gonna die in an apartment. They just don't care. Have it forever. This lady, literally, I had this wrap for 10, it had to be more than 10 years. I bought it in Casa Grande right at the peak of the market, and it was worth nothing for a long time. Okay, so any questions about kind of the concept, the mechanics, the logistics, high level?
Are you primarily using it then, like if you were, I know you're not recommending this, but if you did, is this for you're gonna hold and use as a rental? Because you said you use it as a flip, like if you're gonna use it as, like.
More often than not, I'm doing what Derek was suggesting, which is a thin deal, but there is an equity play, either because the market's climbing or hey, there's 20 or 30 grand. I'll go buy rentals, 30, 40 grand off of market because it helps my cash flow and I've got equity there. But I can't flip that, right? So a lot of times it's a thin deal that doesn't make sense, but man, I can make $100 or $200 a month in cash flow. And I'm getting $100 or $200 a month in principal buy down. And since this is in my name, I'm now getting a tax write-off because I get to depreciate that asset off of my income. And it's potentially appreciating over time, which it generally does over time. I mean, it's win, 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 win for me.
If you cash out the seller or something, or can you get hard money on that? I mean, if you're gonna do it for a flip, lender.
So on a flip, on a thin deal that's a flip, I'm like, hey, it doesn't make sense for me to do this deal at 18 or 12%, but it makes sense if I can get 4% money. I don't need to cash out. I mean, a lot of these guys are making 5 or 10 grand is what maybe or $500 is what they're walking away with. This is somebody who, hey, I don't have the money. I was gonna walk anyway. Here's $1,000, leave your loan in place. I don't need hard money now. That's the whole benefit. And that's part of the conversation is, hey, I would rather, because I'm such a nice guy, I'm gonna go get money to buy your house. Man, you've got cheap money. I would much rather give you the $3,000 or $4,000 than I have to pay my bank. And it's negotiation. I was gonna give him the $3,000 or $4,000 anyway, but it's part of my shtick, right? So I was like, hey, I like you, Derek. I'd rather have you have the money. I don't want to pay these guys. If you leave your loan in place, I can increase my offer by, well, Heidi said I can give you $5,000 more. I was going to give him 10. But if you leave the loan, I'll give him 5. So yeah, it's part of the games we play, but I don't need a hard money lender if I'm doing this typically.
So let's say they wanted 80 grand cash out because they want to buy an RV and travel, but their payoff is 500. They're fine with thinking 80. Well, I don't want to take out a loan for 580, but maybe I would for just the 80.
Great question. So they want 80 grand. It's a deal. Now you have to find a lender that will give you that money. There are second position lenders out there. If you need one, let me know. They're expensive. Okay. Arch Bridge Loans in Southern California, they do these deals where they do an 80% second and a 20% or 80% first and 20% second. The 80% first is like 8%. The second is like at 18 or 20%. The blended rate is 12. So everybody's happy because they're paying 12, but the second he's getting 20%, right? And paying points. So, and I have loaned those deals before personally, right? To my franchisees. Hey, I bridged it. Yeah, I'm that guy. So it's going to be private typically. The hard money lenders, most of them won't touch it. Oh, sorry. Thank you. All right. So I think we're tailing that one. So, I mean, this is more, they're all good detailed stuff. Any questions? Any other questions?
I
That
got one
that was
question
another
on
good one.
title. So, and Derek, I think you mentioned it, but seller has notes with bank and obviously title. I come in and assume wrap, subject to whatever. The title company will give me warranty deed.
Yeah, no, I don't like quitclaim deeds. I stopped,
Quick claim is
So-
not a title transfer.
yeah, I stopped doing that forever ago because, yeah, no title company recognizes them
Yeah.
really.
So
It's
they will
like a
give you,
cloud.
that's why it's sub two, because they're going to insure it, but they're not going to insure that loan,
Okay,
right? So they'll insure everything outside of that subject to, you're taking that subject to. They will insure everything else. They'll insure title, history, prelim, all that kind of stuff. And it's in your name. Tax record comes, tax payment comes to you. Or tax bill comes to you because you are now the registered affidavit of value owner. Okay? The last thing is, if you get into a situation with FHA or VA and it still makes a ton of sense, but you can't do it subject to, we're gonna talk about real estate contracts, contractor title, land contracts, whatever you want to call those.
sale agreement. that's what
Sale
most people
agreements.
call them.
Yep. All the same thing. Those are all the same thing. That just means you have an agreement, there's a loan situation in place. You don't get title until that is completed.
That's
Right.
actually my question. So on a sale agreement or all that salad word, those title will not transfer?
Correct.
So I've seen those transfer.
Well, that's
I
because
wanna
somebody,
figure out how.
somebody recorded something that shouldn't have been recorded. You can record, when we recorded Liz Pendens or sometimes we record our contracts, they change title, right? That the tax person types it in, scans something, they don't know who really owns it legally, you don't own it. So it's not really a transfer of title. You're seeing something, I believe, that doesn't exist. It's smoke and mirrors. In a land contract, you don't own it until you complete it. That's the rule. That's how it works. Okay. There you go. Hang on.
So I have a guy who's trying to sell me his house. He finished his bankruptcy 6 months ago. He's being told by his attorney that he cannot sell his house for 18 months because the trustee may come back to ask for funds. He never included the house in the bankruptcy. So it's an okay deal, not a great deal, but he's looking for 50 grand out of it, but that 50 grand would be more than what he owes on the house. How would I,
Let's take that offline. We talked about that a little bit. You can do some creative, you can do lease options, you can do a real estate contract, you can do lots of things. The concern you have is your risk of money on something that if the trustee does come back and say, oh, we want this equity, you've given him money for his equity that doesn't exist. That's a completely different scenario that we'll take separately. We can, on the last half hour, if you guys want to beat that one around, we can, but that's not on this. You should have added that to the list. Okay, what's next? Okay, so we're gonna put the wraps and sub-twos to bed, okay? You know where to go, how to do, at least where it might make sense and what it looks like. If it looks like a duck, ask, okay? Okay, lease purchase. Says Derek. So Derek's gonna talk about lease purchases.
Be on two sides. I had experience on the seller side where I sold my property in a lease purchase. There's actual Arizona state contracts for a lease purchase. If you do it that way, which I would never do again, as soon as you take payment and a portion of that payment is going towards the purchase of that property, then it's treated like a mortgage. And so this guy literally made one payment and then didn't make another payment. And it took me 9 months to get him out of my house.
You gonna do a foreclosure?
And all I had to do is write a lease agreement on one page and another contract for an option purchase.
Okay, so let's talk about the designation here. A lease purchase and a lease option are two different things. A lease purchase is an agreement that has a whole bunch of terms in it and it's like a rent to own scenario. Right? Lease purchase is rent to own, which he said he will never do again, and I second that. A lease option is the second thing he said, which is we have a lease agreement and you have the option to purchase this house at some point in time. Some lease options say you can purchase it at the end of the lease. Mine says you can purchase it at any time. You can exercise your right to purchase at any time during the lease period. Your lease expires and you haven't purchased it, we start over. You can take money, you can take a lease option fee, and that's money they pay up front for the right to buy your house at a set price. So you can set the price and the terms right now, and they can pay you a fee up front for that. Okay,
What do you do for down, 5, 10, 15, what do you do?
whatever I want to do. So so I have done,
Much as possible.
I've done as little as $500 on dumpy houses that that aren't even livable, that up to 10 grand and plus, right? It just depends on the scenario, the person, the situation, how bad do I want out of it, right? So lease option is highly preferred over lease purchase for the reason that Derek already identified. Okay, you can choose how, if you want to give them credits back. I think I shared a scenario where I was giving for every dollar they paid above their rent, I would match that in a credit if they exercised. So it wasn't payment towards, it was, hey, if you exercise and if you pay $100 more in rent, that when I sell you the house, I'm going to give you a credit equal to double that. Okay. Lease options, there is a percentage of people, a small percentage, less than half perform on lease options. Brian Schofield, who's in Tucson, did a ton of these. I mean, you get money up front, you get typically more money in rent, and they take better care of the property because they think they have an intention to buy it. So they take better care of it. Most of them do not exercise. And then you can rinse and repeat. I'm a fan of lease purchases because of that purpose, way more than real estate contracts for sale. I like to keep my inventory. I prefer rentals over lease options. I prefer lease options over RECs. You decide how you want to get into it, what the down payment is, what the rental is going to be, all that kind of stuff, how you exercise, what the notice is. I mean, there are formal forms. There are forms online and all over the place. I mean, you can attach a standard purchase agreement that says, if you exercise, this is what it's going to look like. This is who pays what. You can leave it open-ended and say, hey, you have the right to purchase, but the first year it's this price. After that, we're going to renegotiate. The terms are really not cemented. I mean, the terms between you and your buyer are cemented, or your tenant, but they can be really anything you come up with creatively. So, and I'm a deal junkie, so there's lots of creative. There isn't like a one size fits all, and you can work through that. Has anybody else other than Derek done lease options?
I did a lease purchase. It turned out really good. Let me just mention this because I fell into it. It was a mobile home in a park. And there's no money in it. After I fixed it up, maybe $2,000. Like, whatever, I'll do it just because they really want me to do it, you know. So it happens I put like 75, I bought it for 7,500 into it. And then I was gonna sell it, and the manager of the park called me and said, hey, someone can't afford a house, but they are interested in your property. Would you consider a lease purchase? I said, hey, that's not an option. In hindsight, I didn't know this. But it's a good deal. It's they have to give me at least 2 years or else they gotta pay more for it. And I make $450 a month and it just sits there, and they're good tenants, which is important. But yeah, just for nothing. Oh, and as part of the purchase, I said, but you have to pay upfront, non-refundable, $7,000 or $7,500. So I got all my money back except for the $5,000 I put in to buy it, making $450 a month. It's a stupid little mobile home. So yeah.
So think about how crazy this is. You walk into an appointment, there's no equity. They've got a decent loan. You're like, hey, this isn't going to work for a flip. but maybe there's an option to do a sub two or a wrap or something. You go take that, and then you find a buyer who comes in and says, you know, and you have to give them $5,000, you know, to take care of, to get their walking money. Then you have a buyer comes in and says, hey, I'll give you 10 grand down and I'll pay you $400 a month, you know, to buy this or whatever the number is. And you get your money back that you paid your seller. You get some money in your pocket. You make $100 more in your, I mean, we've done these deals where there's contracts on both sides. Again, the risk is it blows up one side or the other, but there's lots of times where everybody just does what they're supposed to do. And this person pays, and then they don't fulfill their obligation. And by the time, and then they quit 2 years later, you're like, wow, now I've got equity. I fix it up and I sell it and I pay this person off. I mean, you can work these things in conjunction, right? If you just think creative, I don't know what the deal looks like. Let's just figure it out. And players will come up. Mobile homes in parks, is that what that one was? So I had a mobile home in Apache Junction in a park. I sold it 3 times, $5,000 deposit each time. They were paying me $250 a month. And the first 2 people failed to perform.
And they're paying the lot rent.
Oh, absolutely. They pay the lot rent. They're paying me $250 for the house. They're paying $700 a month for the lot rent. And by the 3rd person in the neighborhood, they just paid me 20 grand for the mobile that I paid $10,000 to begin with. Paid 10. I got $5,000 deposits plus $250 a month for like 6 years or something. And I sold it for 20 grand at the end.
And these guys pay me $1,200 a month, lot fees $750. And if it goes up, there's a contract, if the pad fee goes up, they gotta pay it. And yeah, if they buy it out within 2 years, they gotta pay a premium on top of what it was gonna be. So it's a guaranteed, if they did buy out, about
If they don't?
$30,000. I'm like, okay, I'll do that, right? So.
And if they don't, you get to keep their money
Yes.
and do it over
So-
again. There's nothing wrong with that, okay?
Right.
Well, there's no franchise fee on a mobile home in a park. It's a car. You buy a mobile home that's not on land. There is, it's just a motor vehicle, okay? All right. Lease options. Okay, so there's not a major downside for you on a lease option that I can think of as a seller, right? Not a major downside for a buyer. You flip the other side, buying houses on lease options. If any of you bought a house from a seller in a lease option, why would you do that? Really?
To keep it as a rental?
Do whatever you want with it. I would do it. I've just never tried it, I guess.
Okay, I'm surprised you have with all your creative deals. So you go into scenario again, it's a thin deal, or again, this guy he's so smart, he's got all the numbers, he's like, I'm only gonna do this if, right? Or somebody says, hey, if I sell the house, to your scenario, okay? If I sell this house, I owe so-and-so, I'm obligated, I've got a prepaid, I had a first buyer or a first-time home buyer, $10,000 credit that expires next year. If I sell you the house, I gotta pay that, I have nothing. But if I sell it to you next year, well, I don't wanna wait till next year, right? What if I do a lease option with you, right? And I will lease it from you and give you some money, you walk, and then I'm gonna sublet that to somebody else, and we're gonna keep that in your name, and I'm gonna rent it. I mean, there's scenarios in which you, for whatever reason, need to keep the house in the seller's name. I've done joint venture deals. Okay, you can do a joint venture deal with a seller. Seller says, I think the house can sell for this. I don't think it's gonna sell for that, like Spencer was saying, right? Absolutely convinced it's gonna sell for 600. I see 550. If I sell it for more, right? Okay, well, we've done deals where it's, okay, I'm gonna do a lease option, right? He's gonna move out, I'm gonna fix up the house. And there has to be some kind of way to engage with them contractually. A lease option is one way, right? So it doesn't have to sell twice. There may be ways to, again, I'd have to go back and think of the scenarios, but there could be a reason why the seller needs to remain on title. You want to have an interest, you want to be able to maybe rent that for a period and buy it later at a fixed price. I don't know what the market's going to do. I don't want to be on the hook right now. Right now, there was an article yesterday saying the market could go down 25% by the end of the year. That'd be a good time for a lease option.
What do you
Like-
think it's gonna do?
Most of the time, if the seller's selling, it's because they want money out of the house. And if they do that with you, they're not really getting a lot.
most of the time when somebody's selling and needs money for the house, they want money out of the house. I have bought a lot of houses
I mean, yes.
for $1,000 in their pocket.
Really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and anybody facing foreclosure, anybody behind on that, I mean, and this is why I'm a little surprised that more of you haven't, and I think you may be making assumptions on some of these calls and experience. You may go in with a preconceived idea that doesn't exist and turn it in. You may be turning something away because you're not even considering the fact that I may have an answer for you that wouldn't make sense for anybody else, right? So, no, I mean, and option, and again, I've done a lot of assignments and option contracts with assignments in the same scenario. There's just, and I don't think the money's there. I don't think I can make money here. Let's engage in a relationship that allows me to do something and see if we can both make something work. That could be a lease option. It could be a subject to. It could be a purchase option that I'm going to assign, and I'm just going to flip. You've done this a bunch of times. You send it out. I'm not going to make any money. Oh my gosh, I made a lot of money. I can't believe people wanted that, right? Next thing you know, there's a deal there. So those are the kinds, what I'm trying to get you guys is this is all just not putting yourself in a home investor's box. If call me, call Ryan, call Derek, call somebody and say, hey, is there a way to fix this? I told you, I've never dealt with a BK that the house, I've not heard a trustee can come back 18 months later. I'd have to find that out, but that's new for me, right? But I'll tell you, I don't know. But if it's something I've dealt before, yeah, let's try this, okay? So, yeah. Any other questions on options, contracts? Okay, again, the idea is flavors and ideas, understand conceptually like Sandler, does this kind of feel like that? And let's engage if we need to.
Seller financing.
Okay, seller financing. Who has done a deal? You bought a house, seller owned it free and clear, but didn't get any money until you sold it. Really?
I brought it up, they just didn't want
Say
to
it
do it.
again.
Seller finance.
Oh, yeah, I bought land that way.
Okay. So you bought land. Why did the seller give you land without getting their money?
Well, they got a certain amount, a small amount up front, and their version of the whole lease option, sort of. So if I don't perform, they can foreclose on it.
Okay.
We
So why-
did it when we were assembling parcels together to build something on it. So as we were assembling parcels, we didn't want to come up with whatever it was, 750,000. Once we assembled the whole thing, we packaged it and sold it as a project, so.
Okay. What else? Anybody? Paul did a seller finance. Where's Paul? Neil.
Avoid income coming into them, like a big chunk for tax purposes, that when they have that money.
Paul Neal did a seller finance with Heidi, kind of. They did a joint venture deal. Paul got the financing. Heidi did the work, they split a deal. I mean, there's joint venture opportunities. That's technically seller financing, right? It was assigning or selling it to you. You bought it with seller financing. You didn't have to get
I
financing.
didn't buy it
You just did it.
Yeah.
And split it. Has anybody done where you bought a house and the seller owned it free and clear and carried it? Okay, so we need to work on our Sandler, dropping hooks. There are lots of opportunities for sellers to finance.
They just didn't want it.
No, that's fine. If you're bringing it up, maybe it's just how we bring it up, right? So some of the questions are, when you're doing your pain budget decision process, part of the budget step is finding out what their future plans are. What are they doing with the money? Where are they going? How much do they need? When do they need it? What's going to happen? That's going to help you not only buy the house, but it's going to help you with the next thing, which is the creative financing stuff. If we're not having those conversations, we're missing an opportunity both on the buy and as well as creating an opportunity. So when we say, what are you doing with the money? I'm going to throw it in the bank. This is for my kids, right? Man, they're getting 0.5% interest. It's a little higher now, but I mean, you probably wouldn't be interested in getting a lot more money on a property that you're familiar with, right? There's lots of things you can say to kind of change that conversation. You got to throw it out there. They're not all going to stick, okay? I bought a triplex in Phoenix from a couple It was a rental. They owned it free and clear. And at the time, I think he was getting like $900 a month in rent. He sold me that triplex for $65,000 and seller financed it. And I think my note was $700 a month. He sold me the house and was making less money on the seller note than what he was getting in rent. But I never called him once. Right? He didn't need the money. He liked cashing the checks, but he hated tenants. Right? So, I mean, he floated this thing for like 3 years and the market went up. This was down obviously in the bottom of the market, a triplex for 65 grand. But he seller financed that thing for like 3 years. And then I took a big fat cash out, paid him off. It's still, I mean, it's just, I've got lots of those kinds of stories. Just ask the question, find out if they have money, what they can do with money. They'll come to you, right? Some of these sellers will turn into lenders for you, hard money lenders.
What kind of interest would you offer them? How would you bring up that? You know, you say you wouldn't want to make a little more money, would you? What would your starting offer point? They say, I don't know, tell me what you have in mind.
Sounds like it's a concern of yours.
I'm just, how would you start the conversation, you know? You could say you would want to make a little more money, would you? And they're like, yeah, it'd be propose what you have in mind.
Probably wouldn't do it for $50 a month extra.
Well, it's a question of, right? And I say, hey, there's people in this scenario, when I throw it out there, hey, somebody takes their money, they're going to get $300,000 or $400,000 and throw it in the bank and get what, 0.5%? And we have people that, I've done deals, we get 3, 4, 5%.
That's what
It probably would be interesting to you. Sometimes, depending on who I'm talking to, I'll say, hey, 6, 8%. Sometimes I don't say and say, what are you going to do? What would there be? Was there a scenario that makes sense? What does that look like? Right? It's more Sandler-esque. I don't know. I don't care. As long as it's less than 10 or 12, I'm okay. Now, I had a lender that didn't have a lot of money, but he was at 8%. And just as long as I rolled his money, I just paid him 8%. Right? So I was always trying to be 8%. So if I got it at 5 or 6%, I was still happy. Right? So I was leading with some of those until I went to a convention. I sat down with Brownie Lott. And he's like, oh yeah, I've got all these guys at like 3 and 4. Like, what? Well, my problem is I was leading with a number that was my number, not theirs. But I haven't done a ton since then. So I just know that I shot myself in the foot. So. Okay, questions, comments about subject or about the seller financing, what that looks like. Again, the length of time, the interest rate, all of that stuff is completely negotiable. How you set it up, if it's going to be financed or serviced or not. I mean, it's the same thing as, doing a wrap. You can set it up formal, you can set it up informal. Is it serviced? Is it not? Is there a note and deed of trust? Is it not? I mean, you decide how deep you want to go on that based on what your seller needs and how comfortable they are working with you. Okay? What's that?
Joint ventures, Paul, Heidi, Taylor.
Okay. So, yeah, Paul's not here. He took up. So we'll start with Taylor. My introduction to his bosses and partners were I bought a house. They, like Gus, always looking for deals. So I assigned a couple houses to them. I slightly lowered what my assignment fee. It was one of these things where people were bidding it up and I said, hey, I'll sell it to you guys at this price. They took it, did the work, and we split the proceeds. Okay. I did that a couple of times with them and they kept looking at my buy numbers. They're like, this is, I mean, you made money and then made money again. How do we play at the front end of that? And they bought a franchise. Okay. And I know he's done joint venture deals with other people and since then. So lots of experience here. And we're gonna talk about Heidi and hopefully Paul comes back. But if you want to share some of your experiences and your guys and what you do and what joint venture deals look like, that'd be awesome.
Well, oftentimes these wholesalers are going to be sending me properties and I'm like, hey, I'm $20,000 off. And I said, but would you ever be open into, getting it at my number, and then we split, you know, anything over, you know, the set number that I feel like I need to make on the property. And if we get anything over that, we'll split it. And that way they have an opportunity to possibly make more. They're making a little bit up front with an assignment, but then splitting something. And at the end, if you know, we get over asking, or if they're telling me, yeah, the ARV is this, the ARV, and I'm like, well, I don't really see that. But hey, if we get this, anything over, sure, we'll split that. I've done that a few times and it worked out well.
So they're signing to you.
They're assigning it to me.
So let's say they want to sign up for 400. Give us some numbers.
Yeah, so let's say, I'll make it really simple numbers. Let's say the ARV is $100,000, right? And my comfort level is 65,000 because it needs a little bit of, you know, something in there. So I'll do it for the 65,000, and I say, hey, you're telling me it's worth 120. I'm only seeing 100. Anything over 100, let's just split. This is my number. I feel good about it.
Buy it at your number.
Well, my number, because they are dead set that it's gonna go
And
120.
what's their security that you'll give them?
Good old fashioned handshake.
Honestly, it's because we bought plenty of houses from them. And so, yeah, the relationship.
Well, we had the deal, I had a contract. I mean, it was a letter of understanding, how we're gonna get into it, how we're gonna split it. We both signed it. If it turns sour, it's a contract. I mean, I'd have to litigate it, but it's an agreement. If anybody wants a copy, I mean, it's again, I'm not an attorney. I just wrote up what we were doing. But if you think about, most of you are not assigning as much as we were. But if you think about when we were all assigning stuff, it's like, hey, we kept saying wholesale, or you guys should be rehabbing this more money. Like, man, I don't want to do crews. I don't want to manage this. I don't know what I'm doing. These guys do it all day long. I know there's more money, but I don't want to try to get to it. Here's an opportunity maybe to get a hybrid and do both, right? So I did sell it to them at their number. You know, if I want 180 grand, and he's like, no, I think it's 160 is the most we can pay. I'm going, man, there's a huge upside on this remodel, right? And did Tempe, and they're like, okay, how about, I think we settled in the middle and said, okay, we'll do it at 170. I got my spiff. It was a $10,000 discount. But then when they sold it, I think I got a $30,000 or $40,000 check at the end. So we split like 60 or 80 grand at the end. So I gave up 10, but I made 30 or 40. So, I mean, it's a win-win-win. It makes just a ton, and I didn't have to do a thing. I think in that scenario, I had already lined up my financing. I think I did leave my financing in place, which is why I got that extra money. I said, hey, I'll use my financing. It's in place. You guys pay for all the rehab. They paid all the rehab. You manage it, you sell it, do everything else, and we'll split it. So it was a great scenario, and everybody, I mean, they get an extra deal and they made money, right? Nothing wrong with that. So rather than me assigning it to some schmo who's going to make that money, right? And I get an extra 10 grand. Now I get a little bit more and it stays in the family and he wins. Okay.
So
So
also done that with a seller before as well, and it worked out really well. Where they kept their financing in place. We came in and did the rehab. It was in our name. We owned the property just with their financing. I don't know how we set it up, but it was.
So that's what I was going to say. So this is one of those scenarios that if you're going to engage in a joint venture kind of deal with your seller, make sure you have something, right? Not a good old fashioned handshake there. You want to have something. You could do a lease option. You could do a sub two. The sub two, you're taking title. A lot of times they don't want to do that.
If you're gonna put like 50 grand into it of your own money and.
Absolutely. If they'll let you do it. Yeah, absolutely. You want to go as far as you can if they'll let you do it.
Can you put a second on it?
Absolutely. So you can put a second on it. You can do a note and deed of trust with them. There's lots of ways that you can engage in that. I love the idea of engaging with the seller. If you guys are bouncing around on, and if you've heard my satisfy, don't justify, I really don't like getting into numbers with the seller. Let's all agree that there are numbers sellers out there. There are guys that are green. They've got the numbers. This is the threshold and I'm not, and I've done the analysis and I know I can sell it for here and it's going to cost me this much and I've already bought the materials. I mean, come on, we've got numbers sellers. If we're close, and you can engage with that person in a joint venture deal, they've already got the materials and you've got the people that can do it and you can knock this out and use instead of a 3% agent, you can use a $1,700 agent. You're making more money for both of you and it's a win-win. Dude, joint venture with a seller. Make money, make a deal happen. It increases your numbers, increase your percentages. It allows you to make some money. I mean, all of that stuff, okay? I will caution you not to jump there too soon. Just like an option contract and everything else we talk about, just like a listing, you still need to hone your Sandler skills and be okay with walking away and getting your hand on the doorknob. This is stuff that happens typically after we're at the exit sign. Everybody understand what I mean by that conceptually? Okay, so don't give it up too early, but when you get there, man, there's so many creative ways to make deals happen. It also makes this way more fun. It really does, to sit down and it's like, wow, I just made something happen. They're happy, I'm happy. There was nothing here and something happened, okay? Okay, you did a deal with Ms. Murray. Tell me why you did that deal, how you did that deal, how it came to pass, and why it made sense.
Sure. Let me just tell you one real quick before that. I did one with JJ and Jamin as well, because I wasn't sure about my numbers, and they're like, yeah, we'll split the risk with you. And it turned out well. I took several more months than we thought, because it ended up going through us, through probate. But that one turned out well. I didn't take the risk. They had the financing, but it was my deal. So I was glad about that one. With Heidi, what happened was I had a property, and at the time I was in the middle of like 5 rehab projects, 4 or 5, and I did not want to take on another one. But I tried to assign it the best I could find. Someone wanted maybe $4,000 or $5,000 more than what I was buying for, and I knew there was value in it. I just didn't want to take on another one. So Heidi and I got talking, and she said, well, what if I do all the work, take out the financing for the rehab? And I said, great, I'll hold it. And that's what we did. And I don't know, it took a few months, but she did a fantastic job. Is that?
6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
Put 50 into it.
We put 50 into it. She did a great job, and a lot of it she did herself. She's very talented, by the way.
So 6 weeks, 50 grand in rehab, you were gonna make 5 or 10 grand.
Close to 10.
Did you assign it to her at 5 or 10, or did you just
No,
zero?
we talked about assigning it, but Heidi wasn't really sure she wanted it because the risk was it could be plus more. And it just.
So you didn't get, in this scenario, you didn't get any money up front,
No.
but you saw the opportunity.
I knew there was money. If I took it down, I could make some money on it, but I didn't really I just knew there was some more money to be made. So Heidi offered, and I said, hey, yeah, I'm open. It was her idea. And so we did, and we both ended up doing very well on it.
And Paul's a perfect person to work for because he totally trusted me, which I appreciate, and didn't micromanage, because there's a few things I wanted to spend more money on. Whenever I'm like, we're gonna rip out all these cabinets, we're gonna double check the pool, and but we got a surprise upswing in the market and a cash buyer, and we each made 5-ish.
Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna restate what I said earlier. A lot of these creative things I want you to think about, but don't make a whole business on it, because you receive the benefit of a climbing market. You don't want to have all of your deals be creative, thin margin options, joint venture, right? I mean, we do need to make money now, today, with the deals that we've got. So do a couple here, a couple there. So let's talk numbers if you don't mind. So you were looking at 5 to 10, weren't really getting it. You didn't take any money up front. At the end of it, what did you guys end up splitting?
Split. 130.
Almost 130.
You split 130. So you went from 5 or 10, you walked away with like 60 grand.
Over a little over 60.
I
Now,
mean, I feel like it was a bonus to him because he's like, I bought this and now I'm not gonna look at it for 8 weeks or whatever. I can just walk away and forget about it. It was a bonus to me. I didn't spend
Absolutely.
advertising money, and here I have a house, and I love the rehab part. That's my thing.
and we,
And I'm like, I get to do this. And it's like someone handed me a property for free that I can make money with.
Don't-
That's great.
don't call him. He's dragging like 2 properties on me right now.
It's all my fault.
I joke. So we heard a couple of these. It's like, I don't know why we have any assignments going in Phoenix. When we have 2 or 3, she's gone. Melissa,
Heidi.
Money. I couldn't
I
afford.
know,
it
but I'm saying,
at the time.
but I'm saying, Melissa, Heidi, Tyler, Taylor, I mean, we've got enough people in here that can do what you just did, that we should never assign a property. There should be somebody here that can take any deal that we've got, other than maybe something in South Phoenix that is gonna, right? But anything that's reasonably worth doing, we should be able to figure out with ourselves some kind of JV deal that makes sense. Right? So I'm gonna encourage you guys to put it out there, put it in the blog, put it in the communication. Call somebody, call me, I'll direct, I mean, just open up your mouth, open up the email. There's just opportunities that we can all win. I mean, that was mutually beneficial.
If you're gonna assign a property, you should run it by us real quick and see if someone internal could JV on it and get creative. Like, why are we assigning this to other people?
Granted, there are some people that need money up front. You're in a different situation today, right? But your first month in the business, if you're, Sean or Dalton, you're like, hey, I gotta pay advertising next month. I need this 10
Yeah,
grand.
but on that deal, you could have maybe taken $10,000 up front and did a 75-25 split.
That's where I was going. So you say, hey, I get the first 10, Heidi, you're gonna get the first 10 on the way out. And now we're even. Okay, now we'll split that, right? So there's some things that you could do still to make it work where you get what you need. We just need to have the conversation, be creative, be willing to share, okay? Okay, questions, comments? Okay, that all makes sense, right?
Equitable title.
Okay, we're back to Heidi.
Don't talk too much.
You're awesome.
Such a fantastic thing, honestly.
So let me define it. This is not, so some people on the phone, this is not the case in every state. In Arizona, you have the right, once you write a contract, you have equitable title, right? You don't have title on the property as far as name change, but you have equitable interest. You have an equitable title on that property, and Arizona lets you market that equitable title. You can put it on the MLS. Okay, not the case in every state, but in Arizona you can. Okay, so equitable title just means I have a contract with the seller, which means I now have a right. I have an interest in that property, even though I don't own it yet.
Well, my first word of caution is never, ever, ever jump too soon. This is my last resort, other than just listing it, which is a pain, but last resort. But it works fantastic when someone has a number, like especially these number guys. Oh, I know, I'm 370, I'm right, there's no way I'm budging, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. I have this house in Tempe, and it was a 3-2, and it was in a great location. It was older, but 370 was absolutely, and it needed a bunch of work, and the ARV is like 420. I'm like, no, I mean, it was like 90% of the ARV, right, or something. But I'm like, gosh, someone's gotta love this area. Tempe is hot. Like everybody, I just had this done, and so I just said, okay. So the only thing in this business that's been a constant for me is that I don't know. Things like I'll put properties out there, and I'm like, no way, this is gonna sell, and it sells. And I tell the sellers that I've seen some crazy stuff. Why don't you give me 2 or 3 days? See if I can get 370 for you. Let's put it under contract at 370. And if I can find you a buyer, because no seller that I've ever met wants to make 10 phone calls and have 10 appointments and have 10 people sitting in their living room, getting the same old spiel, showing them their house, blah, blah, blah. I said, let me be kind of a broker for you. Let me see if I can find you a buyer at that. You can cancel on me in 3 days if I can. He's like, all right, cool. So we put it under contract with some specific language that he can cancel, da, 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 da. Literally, I sent that thing out to the group within seconds. I sent it out at 390. Gus is like, I'll take that deal. I'm like, why are you buying it at this? I don't even want to know why. I'm just like, that's incredible. And I've done that so many times. And a lot of times it really, like, that wasn't so emotional. But the times where it works really good too is when, so I had a guy in Sun Lakes, and he had an elderly, a 90-year-old friend who had moved in with him, and he was trying to help his friend get a household. It was an okay, just dated older home, but it's the whole neighborhood are these nice tile roofs, and this is that big, ugly brick adobe looking like home. 0 comps. I'm like, those things are so ugly. So I'm not gonna guess at what I think this is gonna sell for. Maybe just over 5. They were absolutely stuck on 460 for some reason. He just really, So I did the same thing. I'm like, and he had dropped a few hints, because you try to get him talking, of course, as long as you can, about how inconvenient it was to have to go over to the house and let someone in and walk through, and he just doesn't have the patience to do that. So I'm like, why don't you let me send it out to some people I know, and we'll just see where the cards fall. I mean, best case, you'll get 460, but even if you don't, at least we'll know what people are willing to pay, and you'll have a dozen offers or so. So he's like, great, sounds good. And it really was just a lot of talking and building relationships. And it took 3 or 4 days. I put it on the MLS a little higher at first, no bites. Then I started getting, I can't remember how I blasted it out, but he ended up, I told him where the offers were, and they were coming in the 420s or something. He ended up coming down all the way. I sat in their living room. I said, okay, this is where we're at. This is how many offers I've got, yada, yada, yada. I'm very careful with my wording because I don't want to be deceptive. So I just say, I can get this deal done for you at this price. But for me, personally, if I can make 10 grand, it's worth my efforts. So I had a guy that I had worked up to 430. And so I told the seller, I'm sorry, the best I can do is 420. This is why. And well, we're gonna have to think about it. Okay. And I drove away and they called me within seconds. They're like, let's just get this done. We're ready to. So he came down $30,000, but I think it was just an emotional game over the next few days. And
The last topic we have is going to be option contracts and the psychology of the seller. I want to put a pin in that because that's super important. Let me take you back to equitable title, because you had a couple of scenarios early on. You signed a contract, you had equitable title, you put it on the MLS, you sold it to a retail-ish buyer, you had an agent. So now you have a house that you've got under contract, but you have a listing. Walk us through that, because that's super confusing for a lot of people, and what you've learned, positive and negative, as far as working with other agents who may or may not understand equitable title.
the guy was stuck on 235, wanted 235. The best comp I could find so far was 280. And it needed paint and carpet, not a lot, but it was one of those nice townhomes like on Milburn and Ray. It was right in there. And it was just a little too, I had a feeling it would sell for more, but I had no solid comps. So I just really, so I said, well, and they mentioned they're leaving for 10 days to go to Alaska, which is perfect. And for some reason, they trusted me enough to leave me with a house key. So I said the same thing, you know, I can't, this is not a number that I can buy at, but what if I could find you a buyer? You want to give me a shot while you're gone? And they're like, sure. So we put it under contract for 10 days, I think, for 235. And I put it on the MLS just to see where it could go at like, I don't remember, 250-ish, enough so that if I got a buyer, I'd still make some and pay the other agent's commission. And that thing got bid all the way up to 290. I also put on the MLS, you know, buy your dream home, all do paint and carpet, come pick your colors, which is, I think, can be a pain, but I took a chance and it got bid all the way up to 290. And luckily I had a really cool agent who could see the vision, because they had cats, you know, and it was just gross. But they walked through, they've been beat out on a dozen offers, whatever. And I'm like, this is what I do. I'm a flipper. Here's some, this is what the carpet will look like. You can pick your own paint colors, make sure it's something neutral that you can sell if they back out on you. And they were super excited about it. So they did their inspections. I put it under contract with them. They did their inspections while these guys are still in Alaska. So they don't go, why are all these people in and out of my house? You know? And when they got home, they're like, I'm like, great, I got a buyer for you. Let's get it done. So I closed with him. Now I have to be on title in order for these people to get their conventional loan. So I closed with him September 1st, did the rehab as fast as we could. I think it took 7 days for paint and carpet in there. They had their appraisal lined up with their lender, good to go. And we closed with them like on the 20th.
So this is a positive example. Having done some equitable title or having experience, Jim did a bunch of those in the past. You will find agents that are not as easy to work with and don't understand equitable title and think that you're doing something illegal by selling a house that you don't own, right? So just understand, if you're going to get into this, you're going to have to navigate all the agents that are showing your properties and explaining to them. You're going to have some clues and cues in the MLS. It's going to have to be disclosed. it's a bit of an uphill battle, but there is definitely an opportunity in the MLS to drive some of these prices up to things like there's absolutely no explanation, but if you want it, fine. Understand if you're trying to get financing, you are gonna have to jump through a few hoops. And if it's a super big margin like that, it may be a little more challenging. If it's a small margin, you may get out of the way and just end up rewriting the contract between the seller and your buyer, your new buyer, and taking a fee, right? You can take consulting fees, you can take agency fees. There's lots of ways to manipulate that money if it's not a big deal. If it's a big deal, you're gonna wanna close it and maximize the opportunity. But there's lots of ways to slice and dice this, and there's kind of some rough waters that you may run into, Daryl.
I was just gonna, kind of off topic per se, but I just looked up SFRs in the Valley 300 and under for sale on MLS. There was 180, yeah, ridiculous.
For what?
Single family residence.
Under 300 as far as.
So
Yeah,
when you
so-
list the property, there is the box you check mark that says equitable interest. So when you list the property, you have to check mark that box.
Like I said, there's certain requirements, but there's also agents that just don't get it.
I write it in the comments, so say, please call the listing agent.
Yeah, there needs to be some conversations and explanation, especially if there's offers. You need to find out, are they FHA? Are they conventional? What, are they getting finance? You need to have this conversation so everybody understands. You don't want this blowing up, especially if you have a seller that's counting on you. And if you're getting into a deal that's like, man, this is thin. If it's thin and you're only 5 or 10 grand, you don't want to get stuck with something, right? Obviously on that one, you're like, oh, I'm gonna buy this one regardless of what happens.
Because I have multiple offers, I'm like, this thing will go, so.
So that's a huge thing that is also going to be on the assignment and option thing. Any other questions about equitable title?
You guys know who Christopher Sloan is? Listing agent? I just search all active homes and only search the equitable interest. There's 13 homes available. And Christopher Sloan has like half of them. And he was even marketing himself as doing the equitable.
Not marketing himself. He's just figured it. It's like Pace doing sub twos, right? You find a lane and get really good at it. Okay, so that's equitable title. There are opportunities there. Again, I mean, every one of these, just one more deal. Is that, we have one more, right?
Options and assignments.
Okay, so that was a great segue to options and assignments. What Heidi was talking about at the end is exactly how I get into option contracts and assignments, okay? Before I jump in, does anybody want to take the lead on your experiences with option assignments? The ones that she referenced, I'm going to call more options and assignments than equitable title. And I'll tell you why in a minute, but anybody else doing a bunch of option contracts?
A few over the years. I don't have any recently right now, but I mean, options are, and also a way to say, let me go try to do this, but if I can't, I have a way out. They don't necessarily have a way out, but you spell it out, you're clear, you're upfront with them, and, I had a deal where they wanted a certain amount, I wasn't sure I could get it. An inspection period does a similar thing. Right, but you be a little more forthright with why, and that, hey, my intentions are this, and that's where I feel better doing it and talking to them and not just saying, hey, I'm gonna come back during the inspection period and back out. People can do that. I'm not gonna do that. I want to make the deal work, but I need some time to figure X, Y, Z. Can I have 5 days? Is it gonna hurt, whatever. Okay, great, write it in there.
Okay, so a couple scenarios. Heidi gave some great examples of dealing with a seller who has some numbers, it's tight. I don't know. We've all had those odd ducks. I can't find any comps with the house that's built on an upside down ship kind of thing. I mean, there's weird stuff. I just don't know. Let's call it what it is, be honest with the seller. There's ones that are thin, right? Hey, I think there might something here, but man, it seems kind of thin and scary, and I don't want to commit myself to buy this if there's no money here, right? So those are a couple scenarios. A third one is, hey, I'm going to meet with a seller and I know it's competitive and there's a bunch of guys going by. Would you rather have a contract now? How many times have you gone and found out that they sold the house to somebody else who came behind you because they said, or they just pushed harder? They got the contract, right? So there is value in getting something signed, even if it's at a number that you're not convinced is gonna make something happen, but you get something signed. So you don't lose that opportunity to somebody else, okay? So there are reasons why, options make sense. An option is exactly that. It's a unilateral contract. The seller's obligated at certain terms, but you are not. You're only obligated if you want to be, okay? So you have the option to do it or the option to get out, okay? So Heidi gave some great examples. She started going in the psychology of the seller. Think about the sellers. Ryan uses this all the time. They're on the internet. They're going. They're trying to find somebody that's going to make this pain go away. When that pain goes away, they can stop typing. They can stop calling. They can stop stressing, right? They go to bed that night thinking that house is sold. They're in a different place in their life. This weight has been lifted. You are now working for them and helping them to an end that's mutually beneficial. That relationship with you and the seller has changed. They're no longer a prospect and you're no longer a potential buyer, right? You now are engaged in a relationship and they sleep at night. Okay, so the psychology of the seller changes. Their need to go out and look for other solutions changes while you're working the scenario. And I've done a ton of what Heidi did. Hey, this house, they think it's worth 500. I think it's worth 450, right? As a wholesale deal, I put it out there at 500. Everybody says no, right? I go back to the seller. Let me back up. So the psychology seller, when you switch hats, you do want to switch hats and say, hey, I'm not a buyer, right? I'm now going through this thing. We're home investors. We've got 20,000 people that buy from us because we're the biggest and baddest. So if you're interested, it probably doesn't make sense for you. If you're willing to give me a week or 10 days at your number, let's see if we can get your number. Probably wouldn't be interested in that, right? Well, yeah, I'd be interested in it. It's only a week or 10 days or 3 days or 2 days or whatever. And the conversation goes like this. Okay, what's your bottom line? Well, I told you it's 450. Okay. We're gonna write this up at 450, and how much time do you want to give me? Okay, well, I need to know in 3 days. Okay, 450, 3 days. We agree? Okay, I'm gonna send this out, and I'm gonna send out to all my people, and one of three things is gonna happen. We're gonna get somebody that says, I'll take it, I'm excited, great. It doesn't cost you anything. You're gonna get your 450. They're gonna pay me for bringing them a deal. We're good. We go to escrow. Everybody's happy, right? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I just told them I'm going to make money. They may or may not have heard it, but I said, they're going to pay me for bringing them the deal. So when they see the settlement statement and I made $20,000, they can't call me upset because I've already told them what's gonna happen. Or I won't hear anything. Nobody wants this house at 450. I'm gonna come back and say, Heidi, I'm sorry, I couldn't get 450. We're gonna have to cancel this. Oh, do you think that's gonna happen? I don't know, but I'll tell you what a lot of times might happen. I send it out at 450. I might have somebody come back and say, I can't pay 450, but I'll give you 459 or 449. Heidi, I'm gonna tell you the 449, but your contract with me is at 450, so you're gonna tell me no. Well, no, I'll take 449. Yes, I'm confused. I thought your number was 450. And we go right back. I start all the way over again. Say, I thought your bottom, well, no, I wanted to give myself some negotiation. Oh, okay. Well, we say 3 days. Well, because I needed time. Next thing I know, I find out that they're really willing to go to a lower number and give me more time. Okay, well, we have a conversation. Well, the more time I have and the lower the number, the higher the likelihood is that this is going to happen. Okay, well, I'll give you a week. And I'll do it at 439. That's the lowest, 439. Okay, great. So we've got a week. I can't pay 439, but I'm going to give you 438. And you're going to tell me no. Yeah, I'm going to tell you no. Okay. That's kind of how the conversation typically goes. You have the contract, have an option language. I send it out to my group at 450. or 60, whatever my number is. I got a bunch of people come back, hey, I think I want, but I'm not getting anything over 439. Okay, actually, the best offer I have is 430. I go back to my seller. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I can't get to your 439. The best offer I'm getting, because I want my 10 grand, is 420. But you're probably going to say no at 420. Yeah, I can't do 420. No, but I said 439, but we've been thinking about it. Why? Because they've spent the last week sleeping well at night. They've already started spending the money, right? They've moved on. They don't want to start over again. And I just sent it out to 20,000 people who said they don't want their ugly house at 439. If there's bond and rapport and all that stuff, they trust me and know that I'm not playing games. Okay, oh man, I can't do it at 420 though. We got to have at least 435. So I go back to my guys at 439 or 430 and I say, I can't do it at 430, but I can do it at 440. And he says, no, 437 is the highest I'm going to go. Go back to my seller and I say, I can't do it at 435, but I can do it at 432. Oh, can you meet me in the middle? I go back to my buyer. Can you meet me in the middle? Next thing you know, I made 8 or 10 grand by pushing them just a little bit and we work to a number and everybody's happy. I've never had that scenario where somebody walks away and says, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that. It took me, I've already spent the time in the home. I've already spent Ryan spends 45 minutes. I've spent 3 hours there talking to them about their world. They trust me enough to go through this. I've written up a contract. It's going to take me probably, in my experience, 3 or 4 hours of calling, of sending it out, talking to people, talking to my seller, negotiating something to make this happen in order to make 10 grand. Will anybody work for 4 hours for 10 grand? Okay, that's what I've done. Now, what happens a lot of times is I send it out at 450 and I get people that say not only yes, but you get a Gus Brown or a Taylor, someone says, yeah, I'll pay that. And I got 2 people, I'll pay you $5,000 more. It's like, wait a second, this makes no sense. So a lot of times I don't have to spend the 4 hours and I make 20 or 30 grand. But here's what's really cool. I take a house that I didn't think had equity. I send it out, this one that you got 294, you put it on the MLS or you put it out to your investor group. You find out there's a whole bunch of people that want it. What's my level of confidence now? Now my psychology has changed. I'm going to buy that house. No matter what happens with this buyer, with any of my investors, I'm buying that house because there is a long line of people that want it. I may take it down and wholesale it now because now I know I can clean it out, get rid of the cat stuff, and I'm going to maximize this thing. I will let the market tell me what I should do with the house. If I send it out and nobody wants it, or I've got somebody really smart like Gus or Heidi that says, oh, we did a house down the street down there. We did it to the nines and nobody wanted it because there's Hobotown next door. I didn't know that, right? And they may give you the information, say, you don't want to walk, you want to run from that deal. I've had that happen where people have talked me out of it because I've sent it out to a list and they're like, you're crazy. You couldn't pay me to take a house in that neighborhood. I didn't know. We got 15 or 20,000 investors that do. Okay, so the psychology, the relationship of the seller and you, the relationship, your ability to have product that you sent out to the investors. We talked about building this investor list with Lamar. If we don't have product to put out, that investor list is going to die. But if we've got option contracts, we put stuff out to the investors. We get stuff from wholesalers all the time at bad numbers, but we also get wholesale deals from those same investors at good numbers. So there's a mix, right? The other thing is in my contract, the moment you sign with me saying that I'm going to market this property, I also have permission to put a sign in your yard because I'm trying to get you your number. I'm doing you a favor. I get my billboard with my phone number in their yard for a week. And a lot of times the neighbor will buy that house through me from the seller that they didn't even know was going to be available. Those are the best deals. I don't even have to send it out to the investor list. Somebody calls me, wait, you put a sign? I didn't know that house. My sister's been looking. What? Oh yeah, we can make that work. It needs work. We don't care. I love those. Okay, and it's not going to happen all the time, but I mean, right off the bat, you listed 3 or 4, and that's for me. I didn't do equitable title. I did option contracts. I would sign a contract with their terms, with option language that allows me to get out, and then I would go shop that thing. And I might close on it, I might not, but they knew This wasn't an inspection, like, I'm gonna send it out, during my inspection period, I'm gonna cancel. This is above board, 100% honest conversation about what our anticipation, and I like doing that because I've already set the expectation. I'm gonna bring you potentially a lower offer. You have the control, and you're gonna tell me no. That's all Sandler. I'm telling them that a lower offer may come. They think they're in control, but I've just told them they're gonna tell you no, and they're already convincing themselves why they might want to consider it. Psychologically, they're doing that over the next week. Oh my gosh, what happens if he brings me a 235? What's gonna happen? He's gonna sleep on it, they're gonna dream about it. And I'm gonna bring it to them. Oh, see, it happened. Sorry. We should cancel it? No, I really want to have this done. Right? You've had those conversations, right? Yeah. You went down. You went to a number that they said, no, and they called you back. Please, let's just get it done.
Tired. They want
Yeah.
it to be done.
We don't want to do this on purpose, guys. Do not screw with your sellers' psychology. It's not cool. It's very effective. We could do it, but we're not those people. Okay, so be honest, be genuine. Karma, good things come around. Okay? If you need help with option contract, I think I've sent it out and shared it with people. If you need help with, we can role play and practice that psychology conversation. I made a lot of money on option contracts, especially as the market starts to shift and we're not really sure what's going to happen. Man, we got to get really good at getting people on the hook and moving that product without us being exposed. It's going to be really important for us. You don't want to learn that when the tide's already turned. It's like everything else, right? You guys look worn out. Questions, comments? I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff here, and it's a little surprising with so much experience, both before and during Home Festers. We don't have more of you with more of these experiences. So that's exciting to me that there is opportunity here, because it's those deals that we're just getting beat up on. We may not just be asking the second or third kind of curiosity. You probably wouldn't even consider something like this. Bam, we just got another deal. It's only 10 grand. But dude, that's half next month's advertising. Did you have your, Eric?
I was gonna say, I don't have an option contract. Can you share yours with me?
Yep. So I don't have an option contract. I use a standard purchase agreement. You can use the one that the attorney came up or the AAR contract, and then I just have option language. I'm entering into this agreement for the sole purpose of remarketing property for sale. It's the first line. The second line says, I have the right to cancel without cause or without recourse. This contract will automatically terminate unless I open escrow by this date. Okay, so if I don't open escrow, it defaults to termination. I didn't used to say that, but I accidentally ran out of time on one that I didn't want to buy. I thought I had a buyer. We were negotiating. The time went through. The buyer fell through. I was on the hook. So I changed it so it automatically terminates unless I open up escrow.
Okay. Within
Whatever period of time. I've had as much as 45 days, actually 60 days, I think was my longest option assignment contract. Yeah, I mean, here, think how many times you've been with people that's like, this isn't a motivated seller. Oh, I don't care. I could be here another 3 or 4 months. It doesn't matter. As long as I get my number. Write an option contract. Let me spend the next 2 or 3 months to see if I can get anybody to take your number. If everybody says no, you can go back to the seller. Guess what? Nobody wants your house. Now you know that you don't want it. Or somebody says, hey, I might want it. Now you may be, I mean, that is a great opportunity to just get something signed. You can negotiate back from there. We're not bait and switching. It may end up being changed, but we're not going in with bait and switch. We're going in with, hey, let's see. Let's engage in something that's mutually beneficial.
What I've done before when I'm doing that, I used to say, I'm gonna try to sell it. And they're like, well, if you can sell it, I can sell it. What I've done instead is changed my wording to, I'm gonna get a partner. There are a lot of people out there that have a different, like Taylor, he has a different business model. He's able to get stuff cheaper than I can, than my office can. Well, I'll partner with him. So my optional contract language says, the buyer will be seeking a partner to complete this contract. He has X amount of days and it has a amount of days and it has an end date on it, and it says the same thing that could cancel it. If you can find a partner in that time, the contract is valid, and all other items remain in place.
And the partner psychology seller, yeah, that's.
Partners help me out because then I can like, it's not internal, and they'll go, well, just why don't you just ask them about it, and then see if they can sell. I'm like, I can't do that because I have to have something that tells me that I have the ability to sell your property. Or to engage in a property. Otherwise I can just go tell it about everybody. I have to have something that has your signature that says, I have your authorization to do that.
So that's why I personally don't like the partner thing, because I say the same thing. I legally say I'm a licensed broker. I legally cannot market a property I do not have an interest in. I am required to have a signature on an agreement that gives me the right to further market your property. Okay, and if it's a partner, to me, it's like, well, it's your partner, just go talk to your partners, right? No, this is, I'm gonna market this to investors and third parties. I'm gonna work my tail off to try to get this done. We're talking thousands of people that I'm gonna try to get this done for you. But I can't do that if you don't give me the right to do that, and I need to have something signed.
Remember,
That's a
partner
great
could be a construction company, not necessarily a home investor. So it could be an outside entity that you're calling a partner, but you're bringing in somebody else to help you fulfill that contract.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, great point. Questions, comments, clarification?
5 more minutes.
Okay, we're actually, I didn't stop at my 90-minute mark. The stuff we talked about last month, did anybody implement, anybody that has like hey, I found a networking partner, a good success story between last month and this month? There are, I don't know how many deals, but between effective networking and creative deal making, I mean, the fact that we weren't doing any of that last month, and it seems like we're not doing much of this in this meeting, it's super exciting. There's a lot of opportunity here. So share, anybody did anything last month that was a success story, maybe you're still implementing? Any questions? This is open dialogue, open floor for the last few minutes here.
About one yesterday where we just reached out to some investor in the neighborhood who had already sold the property. Because I wanted to know how kind of traction he got, if there was a lot of people bidding on it or how that went. And we made good rapport with him. And he called me and said, hey, I got another deal. I'm too busy. Would this fit your buy box? And it did.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that last month. In a neighborhood that you like to buy, find other investors that are flipping there, because they may be like Paul. I got one too many this month. That's excellent. Congratulations. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments, needs? Appreciate your input.
Yeah, Michael.
Thanks for joining us.
So next month, it'll be on the 27th, and we're gonna be talking about follow-up in Uggville CRM, how to work old leads, text message, email, and then we might schedule John Valerie to do a presentation for us too.
I'm going to send out probably a survey. I realized when I did the first thing that I only gave, you get 3 stickers. So there were things that other people want. It's like, oh, between this one and that one, but I only have 1. So I'm gonna send out another survey where I give you like 5 votes, and that way it'll give us a better view. So you'll see something coming probably from SurveyMonkey or something from me shortly with additional topics. If there's anything else that has come up that's not on our list from before, let us know. We can put it on so we can address it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.